The soft glow of candlelight flickered across the elegantly set table, casting warm shadows on the walls of the upscale restaurant. It was our 10th wedding anniversary, a milestone that should have been filled with laughter and joy. I had meticulously planned this evening, from the exquisite menu to the perfect wine pairing, hoping to create a night that would be etched in our memories forever. My wife, Sarah, looked radiant in her deep red dress, her hair cascading in soft waves over her shoulders. She was the epitome of grace and beauty, and as I watched her, I felt a swell of pride. We had built a life together that many envied, a successful marriage, a beautiful home, and a thriving career as the CEO of a tech company. I had always believed that our relationship was built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. But as the evening progressed, I sensed an undercurrent of tension that I couldn't quite place. "Can you believe it's been 10 years?" I asked, raising my glass for a toast. "To many more," she replied, her smile faltering for just a moment. I brushed it off, attributing it to the weight of the occasion. As the main course was served, I noticed Sarah's gaze drift to the window, her mind seemingly elsewhere. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine, hoping to draw her back into the moment. "You know, I couldn't have done any of this without you. You've always been my rock." She squeezed my hand, but her eyes were clouded with something I couldn't decipher. "I know, and I appreciate everything you've done for us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the unease lingered. I could feel it in the air, thick and suffocating. As dessert arrived, I decided to lighten the mood with a joke, but before I could speak, Sarah took a deep breath, her expression shifting from apprehension to resolve. "Can we talk about something serious?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. My heart sank. "Of course, what's on your mind?" She hesitated, her eyes darting away as if searching for the right words. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." The air around us grew heavy, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "What is it, Sarah?" "I've been seeing someone else," she confessed, her voice breaking. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I blinked, trying to process what I had just heard. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been having an affair," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "With Mark." "Mark?" "My vice president. The man I had trusted implicitly, the one I had mentored and brought into my inner circle." The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. My mind raced, a whirlwind of disbelief and rage. "How could you do this to me?" I demanded, my voice rising. "I'm so sorry," she pleaded, her hands trembling. "It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Didn't mean for it to go this far?" I echoed, incredulous. "You've been lying to me for months, Sarah." "How long has this been going on?" "About 6 months," she admitted, her voice barely audible. The world around me faded as I struggled to comprehend the magnitude of her betrayal. My heart raced, and I felt a surge of anger boiling within me. I had built my life around trust, and now it lay in ruins. "I can't believe this," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "You've destroyed everything we built together." "I know," she sobbed, her face buried in her hands. "I never wanted to hurt you. I love you, but I got lost somewhere along the way." "Love?" The word felt hollow now, a cruel reminder of the trust that had been shattered. I pushed my chair back, the sound echoing in the silence of the restaurant. "I need some air," I said, standing up abruptly. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap in the face. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. My mind raced with thoughts of revenge, of how I could make them both pay for this betrayal. I had always prided myself on being a rational man, but in that moment, all I felt was a burning desire for retribution. I glanced back at the restaurant, where Sarah sat alone, her face buried in her hands. The woman I had loved for a decade was now a stranger, and the man I had trusted was nothing more than a traitor. As the clock struck midnight, a plan began to form in my mind, a way to regain control, to assert my power in a situation that had left me feeling utterly powerless. I would make them both pay for their deceit. The night was far from over, and the real journey was just beginning. The drive home was a blur, the city lights flashing past and a kaleidoscope of colors. My mind was consumed with thoughts of betrayal, anger, and the need for revenge. I could still hear Sarah's voice echoing in my ears, her confession cutting deeper than any knife ever could. 6 months. 6 months of deceit and lies, all while I had believed we were living a perfect life. When I arrived home, the silence felt deafening. The cozy warmth of our house, which had always been a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. I stepped inside, the door closing behind me with a finality that sent chills down my spine. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me. I found Sarah sitting on the edge of the couch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked up at me, her expression a mix of remorse and fear. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said softly, her voice cracking. "Then why did you?" I shot back, my anger bubbling to the surface. "Why would you throw everything away for a moment of weakness?" "I don't know," she replied, shaking her head. I felt lost. I thought I could find something that was missing, but it was a mistake. "I love you, I really do." The sincerity in her voice felt hollow. Love? How could she claim to love me after what she had done? "You love me?" I laughed bitterly. "You've made a fool of me, Sarah. You've destroyed everything we built together, and now you want me to believe that you love me?" "I'm so sorry," she cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'll do anything to make this right." "Anything?" I challenged, my heart pounding. "You think you can just say sorry and we can go back to the way things were? You've shattered my trust, and you expect me to just forgive you?" "I'll talk to Mark," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I'll end it. I'll do whatever it takes to show you that I'm committed to us." I shook my head, feeling a surge of rage. "It's too late for that. You've already crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." Silence enveloped us, the weight of her betrayal hanging heavy in the air. I paced the living room, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. I had always prided myself on being a level-headed businessman, but now I felt like a volcano about to erupt. "Why did you choose him?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "What did he have that I didn't?" "He made me feel desired," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to happen, but he was there when I needed someone." "Someone? You had me." I shouted, the hurt spilling over into rage. "I was always there for you, Sarah. I supported you, loved you, and this is how you repay me?" She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "I know I messed up. I'm so sorry. Please, let's try to work through this." The thought of working through this felt impossible. My heart was a battlefield, torn between the love I once had for her and the anger that consumed me. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to understand the pain she had caused. "I need time," I said finally, my voice steadying as I tried to regain control. "I can't think straight with you here." "Where are you going?" she asked, panic lacing her voice. "I don't know yet," I replied, grabbing my coat. "But I need to be alone." I stepped out into the cool night air once more, the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. I drove aimlessly, my thoughts racing as I contemplated my next move. The initial shock of her confession had worn off, and now I was left with a burning desire for revenge. As I drove through the empty streets, a plan began to form in my mind. I wouldn't just sit back and let Sarah and Mark live their lives as if nothing had happened. I would make them both pay for their betrayal, and I would do it in a way that would leave a lasting mark. First, I needed to gather information. I had to be strategic in my approach, ensuring that my actions were calculated and precise. I thought about the company, the position Mark held, and the influence he had within our organization. He was ambitious, always looking for ways to climb the corporate ladder, and I would use that against him. I pulled into a parking lot, my heart racing as I took out my phone. I opened a secure messaging app, one I had used for confidential business communications, and began drafting a message to my lawyer. I needed to know my options, to understand how I could leverage the situation to my advantage. As I typed, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I was no longer the betrayed husband, I was a man on a mission. I would reclaim my power, and I would do it by dismantling the lives of those who had wronged me. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, a sharp and cunning woman named Rebecca. As I laid out the details of Sarah's affair, her eyes lit up with interest. "You have a strong case," she said, her tone businesslike. "If you're willing to pursue this, we can make it very difficult for both of them." I nodded, feeling a surge of satisfaction. "I want to ensure their careers are ruined," I said, my voice steady. "I want them to know that betrayal comes at a cost." Rebecca smiled, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "We can make that happen. But it will require careful planning and patience." "I'm ready," I replied, my resolve hardening. As I left the meeting, a sense of empowerment surged through me. I was no longer a victim, I was a man taking control of his life. I would execute my plan with precision, and I would watch as Sarah and Mark fell from grace. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I dug deep into the company's financials, looking for any discrepancies that could be exploited. I reached out to trusted colleagues, gathering intel on Mark's dealings and any questionable behavior that could be used against him. With each piece of information I uncovered, my resolve solidified. I was methodically dismantling their lives while keeping my own facade intact. I was still the charming CEO, the man everyone respected, while secretly plotting their downfall. As the days turned into weeks, I felt a strange sense of calm. The emotional turmoil that had once consumed me began to fade, replaced by a singular focus on my plan. I was no longer the betrayed husband, I was a strategist, poised to reclaim my life and my power. And as I looked ahead, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The game was just beginning, and I was ready to play. The clock struck midnight as I sat in my home office, the dim light of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. The familiar hum of the city outside was a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. I had spent the last few weeks meticulously planning my revenge, and the time had come to execute my strategy. My heart raced with a mix of adrenaline and anticipation. I was about to take control of my life in a way I had never imagined. I had gathered enough information on Mark to begin my assault. His ambition had always been his Achilles heel, and I was ready to exploit it. I had unearthed evidence of his questionable business practices, falsified reports, misappropriation of funds, and even a few indiscretions that could easily be leaked to the board. But before taking action against him, I needed to ensure that my own financial safety net was secure. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank accounts, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I initiated the transfers. The funds I had accumulated over the years were substantial, and I wasn't about to let Sarah or Mark benefit from my hard work. As I transferred the money into offshore accounts, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. Each click of the mouse felt like a step closer to reclaiming my power. With the financial moves in place, I turned my attention to my plan for Mark. I had decided to gather a few trusted colleagues and set a trap. I would call an emergency meeting, one that would appear to be about company strategy, but would ultimately serve as the perfect opportunity to expose Mark's treachery. I could already envision the looks of shock on everyone's faces when the truth came to light. The next morning, I sent out the meeting invitations, carefully crafting the message to convey urgency and importance. As the replies came flooding in, I felt a surge of satisfaction. This was it. The stage was set for Mark's downfall. As the day of the meeting approached, I maintained my composure, putting on the mask of the confident CEO. I engaged in conversations with my colleagues, pretending as if everything was normal, while inside, I was a cauldron of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a dark thrill that came with the anticipation of revenge. On the day of the meeting, the conference room buzzed with chatter as my colleagues filed in. I took a moment to appreciate the scene. Everyone looked eager, intrigued by the prospect of an emergency meeting. I sat at the head of the table, my demeanor calm and collected, as I waited for everyone to settle down. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," I began, my voice steady. "I appreciate your time and commitment to the company. As I spoke, I scanned the room, my gaze landing on Mark, who sat at the opposite end of the table. He appeared confident, perhaps even smug, unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. I could see the ambition in his eyes, a trait that had once impressed me but now felt like a glaring target. I called this meeting to discuss some recent developments in our operations, I continued, pacing the room as I spoke. As you know, our company has always prided itself on transparency and integrity. However, it has come to my attention that there have been some discrepancies in our financial reporting. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. I could see the flicker of concern in my colleague's eyes, and I relished the moment. Mark, would you care to explain the recent financial reports that have come under scrutiny? His confident demeanor faltered for a brief second before he regained his composure. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding, James. I can assure you that all our reports are accurate. Is that so? I replied, my tone icy. Because I have evidence that suggests otherwise. I pulled out a folder filled with documents, emails, financial statements, and records of unauthorized transactions, and placed it on the table. Gasps erupted around the room as my colleagues leaned in to see the evidence. These documents indicate that you've been falsifying reports, Mark. Not only that, but you've been misappropriating funds for personal gain. Mark's face paled as the realization of what was happening dawned on him. This is ridiculous. You can't be serious, he stammered, trying to regain control of the narrative. I assure you, I am very serious, I said, my voice cold and unforgiving. This is a matter that the board will need to address immediately. The meeting descended into chaos as my colleagues began to murmur among themselves, disbelief etched on their faces. I watched as Mark's bravado crumbled, replaced by a look of desperation. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when he realized that his ambition had led him into a trap of his own making. James, you can't do this, he pleaded, his voice shaking. You're ruining my career. No, Mark, I replied, my expression unwavering. You're the one who ruined your career. You made your choices, and now you will face the consequences. As I looked around the room, I could see the shock and awe in my colleagues' eyes. I had taken control of the narrative, and with it, I had reclaimed my power. The meeting ended in a flurry of activity as I instructed my assistant to contact the board and initiate an investigation into Mark's actions. After the meeting, I sat in my office, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me, but beneath it lay a darker undertone. I was no longer just a betrayed husband, I was a man who had tasted the thrill of revenge, and I knew that there was no turning back. As the days passed, the fallout from the meeting began to unfold. Mark was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation, and whispers of his misconduct spread like wildfire throughout the company. I watched as his carefully constructed world began to crumble, and I felt a strange sense of vindication. But with each passing day, I also felt the weight of my own actions. I had succeeded in dismantling Mark's career, but at what cost? I had become someone I barely recognized, a man driven by vengeance rather than love. The emotional turmoil churned within me, a constant reminder of the pain Sarah had caused. I had avenged my betrayal, but I was left with a hollow victory. I needed to find a way to detach myself emotionally while still maintaining the facade of a composed CEO. In the midst of this chaos, I continued to distance myself from Sarah. I had moved into the guest room, our once shared sanctuary now a cold reminder of what was lost. She would come to me, pleading for forgiveness and a chance to make things right, but I remained steadfast in my resolve. I could not allow her back into my heart, not after what she had done. As I sat in my office, staring out at the city skyline, I realized that this journey was far from over. I had taken the first steps toward reclaiming my power, but I still had to confront Sarah. I needed to make her understand the full extent of her actions and the consequences that would follow. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but I was determined to see it through. I would not only dismantle Mark's life but also come to terms with my own emotions. I would confront Sarah, and together, we would face the aftermath of her betrayal. But for now, I was ready to embrace the darkness within me, ready to continue this journey of revenge and self-discovery. The months that followed the emergency meeting were a tumultuous whirlwind of change, both in my professional life and personal sphere. Mark's downfall had reverberated through the company like a shockwave, and I found myself at the center of a storm I had unleashed. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that he had been engaging in unethical practices for far longer than I had anticipated. The board was outraged, and whispers of his impending termination filled the air. Much to my satisfaction, I watched as the ambitious man who once stood so tall was reduced to a mere shadow of himself. His reputation, which he had worked so hard to build, crumbled under the weight of his deceit. I had succeeded in my plan, but the victory felt bittersweet. At home, Sarah's presence was a constant reminder of the betrayal I had endured. She had tried to reach out, to express her remorse, but I remained distant. Each time she approached me, I felt the walls I had built around my heart grow thicker. I was a fortress of anger and hurt, and I didn't know how to let anyone in. One evening, as I sat in the dim light of my office, reviewing documents related to Mark's case, Sarah knocked on the door. I looked up, my heart racing with a mix of apprehension and resentment. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I hesitated, then nodded, gesturing for her to enter. She stepped into the room, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "I just want to apologize again," she said, her voice shaky. "I know I've hurt you, and I can't express how sorry I am." I remained silent, my emotions swirling like a tempest inside me. The hurt she had caused was still fresh, and the anger I felt was a constant companion. "You had an affair, Sarah," I said, my voice low and cold. "You shattered the trust we built over a decade. Apologies won't fix that." "I know," she replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never wanted to hurt you. I made a terrible mistake, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken pain. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I also felt the bitterness of betrayal clawing at my heart. "What does make it right even mean?" I asked, my voice rising. "How do you expect me to move past this? You've turned my life upside down." "I'll go to therapy," she offered, desperation creeping into her voice. "I'll do anything to understand why I did this and to show you that I can change." The thought of her seeking therapy felt like a hollow gesture. "And what if you change? What if you become someone else? What if I can't trust you again?" "I understand if you need time," she said softly. "But I love you, and I want to fight for our marriage." Love. The word felt like a dagger in my heart. I had once believed in our love, but now it felt tainted. "I need time," I repeated, my voice firm. "I can't even look at you without feeling the anger boiling within me." She nodded, her shoulders slumping as she stepped back, defeated. "I'll give you space," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But please, don't give up on us." As she left the room, I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. I was torn between my desire for revenge and the remnants of love I still felt for her. The emotional turmoil was exhausting, and I didn't know how to navigate the complicated web of feelings that had taken over my life. Outside of my home, the repercussions of my actions were becoming more evident. Mark's termination was imminent, and the company was buzzing with gossip. Everyone wanted to know the details of the scandal, and I was at the center of it all. I had become a figure of intrigue, a man who had taken down a powerful executive. But instead of feeling empowered, I felt hollow. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself grappling with my own identity. I had been the successful CEO, the loving husband, but now those titles felt like distant memories. I had become a man consumed by anger and revenge, and I didn't know how to reclaim the parts of myself that had been lost. I sought solace in work, burying myself in projects and meetings. I threw myself into the company, determined to maintain the facade of the composed leader. But behind closed doors, I was struggling. I was haunted by memories of Sarah's laughter, our intimate moments, and the life we had built together. In an effort to distract myself, I began to explore new hobbies, things I had never had time for before. I took up running, finding solace in the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. I joined a local book club, immersing myself in stories that allowed me to escape my own reality. I even began to travel more, seeking adventure in places I had never been. But no matter where I went, the shadow of betrayal followed me. It was a constant reminder of the life I had once known and the pain I was trying to escape. I felt like a ghost in my own life, drifting through each day without purpose. As the first anniversary of Mark's termination approached, I decided to confront the aftermath of my actions. I called a meeting with the board to discuss the future of the company and to ensure that the culture of transparency and integrity was upheld. I knew that I had to take responsibility for my role in the situation, even if it meant admitting my own mistakes. The meeting was tense, filled with questions and concerns about the recent scandal. I stood at the head of the table, taking a deep breath as I prepared to address my colleagues. "I want to acknowledge the turmoil we've faced over the past year," I began, my voice steady. "Mark's actions were unacceptable, and I take full responsibility for allowing this to happen under my watch." Gasps rippled through the room, but I continued. "We need to learn from this experience and ensure that our values remain intact. I am committed to making the necessary changes to prevent this from happening again." As I spoke, I could feel the weight of the past year lifting slightly. I was no longer just a betrayed husband seeking revenge, I was a leader determined to rebuild trust within my organization. After the meeting, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I realized that while revenge had consumed me, it was time to focus on healing and rebuilding, not just for the company, but for myself as well. In the months that followed, I made a conscious effort to reconnect with myself. I sought therapy to understand the emotional turmoil I had experienced, exploring the complexities of trust and betrayal. I learned to confront my feelings rather than bury them, allowing myself to grieve the loss of my marriage and the life I had envisioned. As the year came to a close, I began to feel a shift within me. The anger that had once consumed me started to fade, replaced by a sense of empowerment and self-worth. I had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the future. But amidst my healing, I knew that I still had one final confrontation left, one that would bring closure to the chapter of betrayal and allow me to move forward with my life. The dawn of a new year brought with it a sense of hope and renewal. As I stood on the balcony of my apartment, sipping my morning coffee, I took a moment to reflect on how far I had come. The past year had been a tumultuous journey filled with betrayal, anger, and ultimately, self-discovery. I had faced the darkness of my emotions and emerged on the other side, ready to reclaim my life and my identity. With each passing day, I felt stronger and more grounded. Therapy had become a sanctuary for me, a space where I could unpack the complexity of my feelings and begin to understand the choices I had made. I learned to embrace vulnerability, recognizing that it was a crucial part of healing. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance, I was a man taking charge of his narrative. I had also made a concerted effort to reconnect with friends and family, those who had stood by me through the storm. I started attending social events, allowing myself to laugh and enjoy life again. Slowly but surely, the laughter began to replace the emptiness that had lingered for so long. It was liberating to feel the warmth of companionship and the joy of shared experiences. One evening, I found myself at a gathering hosted by a close friend. The atmosphere was lively, filled with laughter and conversation. I felt a sense of belonging that I hadn't experienced in months. As I mingled with the guests, I was introduced to a woman named Claire. She was vibrant and engaging, her laughter infectious. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself drawn to her warmth and authenticity. "Tell me about yourself," she asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. I hesitated, unsure of how to share my story without burdening her with the weight of my past. "Well, I'm a CEO of a tech company," I began, trying to keep it light. "But I've recently gone through some personal changes." "Changes can be good," she said, her smile encouraging. "I believe they often lead to new opportunities." Her words resonated with me. I realized that I was no longer defined by my past. I had the power to shape my future, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. As the evening unfolded, I felt a connection with Claire that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Over the next few weeks, Claire and I began to see each other more frequently. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and I found myself opening up to her in ways I hadn't anticipated. She was compassionate and understanding, never pushing me to share more than I was comfortable with. It felt refreshing to be around someone who accepted me for who I was, flaws and all. As our relationship deepened, I began to confront the lingering shadows of my past. I had spent so long focused on revenge that I had neglected the most important aspect of my life, my own happiness. I realized that I had to let go of the anger I had harbored towards Sarah. It was time to forgive, not for her sake, but for my own. One afternoon, as I sat in my therapist's office, I spoke about my desire to confront Sarah one last time. "I think it's time I have a conversation with her," I said, my voice steady. "I need closure." My therapist nodded, encouraging me to explore what that closure would look like. "What do you hope to achieve from this conversation?" she asked. "I want to express how her actions affected me," I replied. "But I also want to let go of the anger. I don't want it to define me anymore." With her guidance, I began to formulate a plan for our meeting. I wanted it to be calm and constructive, a way to bring a sense of closure to the chapter of betrayal that had haunted me for so long. As I reached out to Sarah to arrange our meeting, I felt a mix of apprehension and determination. I had no idea how she would respond. Would she be defensive, or would she finally understand the depth of the hurt she had caused? When the day of the meeting arrived, I found myself standing outside a small cafe, the familiar nerves bubbling within me. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of how far I had come. This conversation was for me, not her. As I walked inside, I spotted Sarah seated at a corner table, her expression a mixture of anxiety and hope. She looked different, more vulnerable than I remembered. I approached her, and as our eyes met, I felt the weight of the past settle between us. "Thank you for meeting with me," I said, taking a seat across from her. "Thank you for agreeing to this," she replied, her voice trembling. "I've been wanting to talk to you for so long." I nodded, gathering my thoughts. "I wanted to meet because I believe it's important to address what happened between us. I need you to know how deeply your actions affected me." As I spoke, I felt the emotions pouring out of me, the hurt, the anger, and the confusion that had lingered for so long. I described the pain of betrayal, the impact it had on my life, and how it had forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities. I watched as tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time, I sensed genuine remorse. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I was selfish, and I didn't think about the consequences of my actions. I'm so sorry for everything." "I know you're sorry," I replied, my tone softening. "But it's more than that. You shattered my trust, and it took me a long time to rebuild myself after that." "I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been working on myself since then. I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I made those choices. I never wanted to lose you." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of compassion. "I appreciate that you're trying to understand what happened," I said. "But the truth is, I need to let go of the anger I've been holding on to. It's exhausting, and I don't want it to define me anymore." Sarah nodded, her expression earnest. "I want you to be free from that pain. You deserve happiness, James. I hope you can find it." In that moment, I realized that forgiveness was not about absolving her of her actions, it was about freeing myself from the chains of resentment. I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "I forgive you," I said, my voice steady. "But it will take time for me to fully heal. I need to focus on my own life now." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded. "I understand. Thank you for giving me this chance to talk." As we parted ways, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had confronted my past, expressed my feelings, and let go of the anger that had consumed me for so long. It was a liberating experience, one that allowed me to finally move forward. With this newfound clarity, I embraced my relationship with Claire with open arms. I allowed myself to experience joy and connection without the weight of my past holding me back. As we explored new adventures together, traveling to new cities, sharing laughter over dinner, and supporting each other's dreams, I felt a sense of hope that had been absent for far too long. Gradually, I rebuilt my life, focusing on my career and personal growth. I implemented changes within the company to ensure a culture of integrity and transparency, determined to learn from the mistakes of the past. I surrounded myself with supportive colleagues and friends, creating a network that uplifted me and encouraged me to thrive. As the year drew to a close, I stood on the balcony of my apartment once more, looking out at the city skyline. The journey of healing had been long and arduous, but I had emerged stronger and more resilient. I was no longer defined by betrayal. I was a man who had reclaimed his power and embraced the beauty of new beginnings. With Claire by my side, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had learned to trust again, not only in others but also in myself. I was ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that I had the strength to navigate the complexities of life with grace and resilience. The sun rose on a crisp autumn morning, casting a golden hue over the city. I stood by the window in my apartment, sipping my coffee while reflecting on the journey I had taken over the past year. It was a time marked by betrayal, anger, and ultimately, healing. I had faced my demons, rebuilt my life, and found love again with Claire. Yet, despite the progress I had made, I knew that one final confrontation awaited me, one that would bring closure not only for me but also for Sarah. After our last meeting, I had resolved to reach out to Sarah again. I wanted to ensure that I had truly moved on, and I felt that confronting her one last time would provide the closure I needed. I decided to invite her to a quiet cafe where we could talk without distractions. As I prepared for the meeting, I felt a mix of apprehension and resolve. The day of our meeting arrived, and as I entered the cafe, I spotted Sarah sitting at a corner table, her hands nervously fidgeting with the napkin in front of her. She looked up as I approached, her expression a blend of hope and anxiety. "Thank you for coming," I said, taking a seat across from her. "Thank you for inviting me," she replied, her voice soft. "I've been thinking about our last conversation a lot." I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "I have too. I wanted to talk about what we've both been through and where we go from here." Her eyes widened slightly, and I could see the tension in her shoulders. "I know I've hurt you, and I'm truly sorry for everything. I've been working on myself, trying to understand why I made those choices." "I appreciate that," I said, my tone measured. "But I need you to understand that my journey hasn't just been about dealing with your betrayal, it's also been about rediscovering who I am outside of our relationship." "I get that," she said, nodding earnestly. "I never wanted to take away your sense of self. I lost my way." "I understand that we all make mistakes," I replied, my voice steady. "But the truth is, your actions changed everything for me. I had to learn to rebuild my trust, not just in you but in myself." Tears welled in her eyes as she listened. "I never wanted to hurt you, James. I wish I could take it all back." "I know you can't," I said gently. "But I've realized that forgiveness is a two-way street. I had to forgive you to find peace, but I also need to forgive myself for allowing this to happen." Sarah looked down, her expression reflecting the weight of our conversation. "What can I do to help you heal? What do you need from me?" I took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of my words. "I need you to understand that I'm moving forward. I'm ready to embrace my life, and I want you to do the same. But it means letting go of the past, both of us." She nodded slowly, her expression shifting from sorrow to understanding. "I want that too. I want you to be happy, even if it's not with me." As we spoke, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I was no longer the man defined by betrayal, I was a man reclaiming his narrative. "I found someone else," I said, my voice steady. "Claire has been a source of joy in my life, and I don't want to hide that from you." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked taken aback. "I see. I'm glad you found happiness. It's important for me to be honest with you," I continued. "I want you to understand that I'm moving forward, and I hope you can do the same. I will, she said, her voice firm. I've been focusing on my own growth, and I want to be the person I was meant to be. I don't want you to carry the weight of my mistakes anymore. As the conversation continued, I could feel the tension dissipating between us. We talked about our memories, the good times we had shared, and the lessons we had learned. It was a bittersweet acknowledgement of what we had lost, but it also felt like a necessary step toward closure. As we wrapped up our meeting, I felt a sense of peace settling within me. Thank you for being willing to talk, I said, a genuine smile breaking through. I think this was important for both of us. Thank you for giving me the chance, she replied, her eyes glistening. I wish you nothing but happiness, James. As I left the cafe, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of the past had finally lifted, and I was free to embrace the future. I had confronted Sarah and had the necessary conversation to bring closure to our chapter. In the weeks that followed, I continued to nurture my relationship with Claire, allowing myself to fully embrace the joy and connection we shared. We explored new adventures together, from hiking in the mountains to discovering hidden gems in the city. With each passing day, I felt more alive and more in tune with who I was becoming. I also focused on my career, implementing the changes I had envisioned for the company. I prioritized fostering a culture of integrity and transparency, determined to ensure that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. As I led my team, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that I was building something meaningful. One evening, as I sat with Claire on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Thank you for being such an amazing support, I said, turning to her. You've helped me see the beauty in life again. I'm just glad to see you happy, she replied, her smile radiant. You deserve all the joy in the world. As we embraced, I realized that I had truly come full circle. I had faced the darkness of betrayal, navigated the complexities of healing, and emerged stronger than ever. I was no longer defined by my past, I was a man ready to embrace the future with open arms. With Claire by my side, I felt a sense of hope and possibility. The road ahead was bright, and I was ready to walk it, knowing that I had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I had learned the importance of trust, forgiveness, and resilience, and I was determined to carry those lessons with me as I stepped into the next chapter of my life. And as I looked out at the horizon, I knew that this was just the beginning of a beautiful journey, one filled with love, happiness, and the promise of new beginnings.